My name's Michael Casey. I am the chairman of the Advanced AI Society. We're a body that represents projects, companies, protocols, people building the variety of pieces that need to go into the decentralized AI stack to build what I think the people on this panel would all agree is an important mission for all of us to ensure that the future of AI is actually founded on technology that ensures privacy, that ensures model verifiability, that sort of protects our data, and doesn't sort of lead us into this world of a totalitarian, monolithic, black box machine-like world. And so we're going to explore in this conversation how we get to that utopia. The man to my left here, I've seen that slide a few times, and we talked yesterday, you've been doing it for 2 years. So I hope that we're still at the fork, but it's the fork, right? We could go either way, utopia or dystopia. And so we're going to really discuss how do we go down the utopia road, because that's where we all want to be, right? Anybody voting for dystopia out there? No, I don't see any hands. Great, you're in the right side. Excellent. Okay, so what we'll do in the interest of time, rather than give us your life stories, we're just going to make very quick introductions about who you are, what you represent. Many of you will not need introductions, but just tell us specifically what your particular organization is doing to get us on the path to utopia.
So I'm Illia, I'm co-founder of Near Protocol, Near Blockchain, and we set out to really solve for everything you described. How do we ensure that you have sovereignty over your data, sovereignty over your AI? It's not their AI, it's your AI. How do we ensure privacy? How do we ensure we solve for energy crisis and kind of through decentralization, through using all those methods we've been building in blockchain space, while still enabling kind of like agents to be economic agents, to be able to transact, to be able to do kind of financial actions and move business and commerce into this AI world.
Cool, and I'm going to go to Ram first, because I'm trying to set this up in a bit of a strategic conversation. So, Near, as you guys would all know, a layer one, very much sort of architectural infrastructure, multi-chain solutions also being built. So that's that sort of base layer solution. OpenLedger, you're sort of, taking, I think, possibly going up the stack a little bit, but tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
So we're a protocol that connects between data contributors and model developers. We believe that AI models will become much more specialized. They'll be domain-specific, not only general models. And we want to be a protocol that brings data contributors and model developers together. And another thing that we're working on is model transparency using attribution. Most of the models today are a black box, right? Enterprises cannot use models which are black box. They need transparency. So we use data attribution to figure out how data impacts a model's output. That's something that we've been working on as well.
Cool, and we're going to get to a conversation a little later about how do we get enterprises to understand that they need this sort of stuff, right? Okay, and now going up the stack a little further, because Venice is really, it's a user-facing solution. What are you doing to get us on the right path?
Yeah, so I'm Teana, a co-founder at Venice.ai, which essentially is like a chat GPT, but it is completely private. It is also unrestricted, so it doesn't contain the same levels of censorship that you might experience when you use something like ChatGPT or Claude, when it tells you that it can't answer you. We're materially different because we use only open source models, so there are no black box models within our platform. They're all open source models where the weights are published, and you can see how that information has been trained. If you go to something like Hugging Face, for example. So really we're providing that optionality for people to continue to use and become familiar with and comfortable with AI, but in a way where you're not compromising your data and really potentially kind of putting yourself in a situation where your thoughts and what you believe could be co-opted by a board of directors of a black box company.
Mm. Okay, and now Bill, in some respects, the odd man out here, not entirely, because you've, throughout a long career of investing and building and everything else, you've pretty much touched all of these areas in many, many respects, and we were just chatting about this little chip company that you were working with a long time ago with a certain cousin of yours. But in some respects, you're going to take us down the stack now, because this is this conversation of going from the architecture to the model verification up to the front end. But really, what you've been doing with Hut 8 and American Bitcoin is American BTC is to solve for the energy solution at the bottom of it. Why is this important?
So background, I'm a venture capitalist. I've been doing that since 1991, so a good 34 years. Before that, I was a semiconductor chip designer and have kind of grown with every wave of technology since that point. I also have started a machine learning company in 2011 that used a lot of data and have been on boards of content companies like Scrib that was used to train OpenAI in the beginning. I am chairman of the board of Hut 8. Hut 8 started as a division of Bitfury, became a publicly listed Bitcoin mining company, and we are transitioning that to become an energy infrastructure company for a very obvious reason, at least to me, which you can't run any of this stuff without electricity. And if you listen to guys like Eric Schmidt, Eric was out there testifying at Congress that if you were to provide the electricity for all of the publicly announced and funded data centers to be built by 2030, we need 30 more nuclear power plants in 3 years. And if you want to go out another 5 years, we need 60. And that's just not possible. And so, we're having situations like in, Portugal, Spain, France, there was a rolling blackout. I would predict that in about 18 months, if all the data centers come up, we're going to start having that issue in the United States. So with respect to Hut 8, we basically took our Bitcoin mining assets, dropped them down into a subsidiary that the Trump's own part of course, which is American Bitcoin. That's getting spun out to be a public company. You'll hear about that tomorrow. We have an AI GPU data center company called Highrise.ai. And over the last year and a half, what we've done with Hut is we've acquired 10 nuclear power plants worth of energy. And we are now, I want us to be basically a Vistra without the CapEx. So we basically acquire this at wholesale, and we cover the costs with the Bitcoin mining stuff and providing to people that are kind of steady users. And we'll start to partition that out to AI companies over, the next few years.
We just to drill it out a little further, because one of the things we're talking about here is the sort of bottlenecking of the current centralized structure of the grid, right?
Yeah.
So, whether it's Bitcoin mining or it is a sort of a more fluid sort of demand response structure, what do we need to do to actually shift us away from it? Just obviously supply is important, but where and how that supply is being delivered at the right time in the cycle is also.
So history always rhymes, and we're about to go through a period that is identical, in my opinion, to roughly 1993 to 1998, when the internet and packet switching technology hit static circuit switch networks. So the phone company lines were not aware. They were dumb pipes, basically. So there had to be a giant gear shift to what I would call a context-aware cloud, where now, the phone lines, basically, you can be on any endpoint anywhere, and the whole system knows where you are, who you are. It has identity, it has provenance, and can connect things and move data from one place to another. The power grid today is like the phone system from 25, 30 years ago, maybe like the water system, plumbing systems today. Water towers provide pressure, and they go through centralized pipes. Now, imagine everybody adding onto the faucet a pump, and people putting pumps with water coming into the system randomly at any time at different pressure. That's what you have on a grid that doesn't know they're there, right? So you're having these big issues. Well, we are going to be having very big issues because the endpoints are now filled with dynamic, fluctuating loads from solar, wind, and hydro, not meant to be on a grid that knows how to load balance. So I think the whole thing's got to get redone in the same way that after the Telecom Deregulation Act of 1996, there was a big change that allowed ISPs and CLECs and ILECs and all these competitive carriers. You can think of ISPs as people with water pumps on the end of a faucet. So there's highly variable load pushed in that the pipes didn't know how to deal with at the time that they have to become aware of, otherwise the network literally explodes, right? So, you know, you have situations now where power companies have too much getting put in the system and they blow up, or they have to ground it, or they would pay Bitcoin miners $1.50 a kilowatt hour just to run machines to burn the energy. You know, so all that stuff's got to become automatic.
Yeah, so Illia, let's just take this for a little bit and run with it in terms of this big picture, like again, Utopia versus Dystopia. You know, there are all these layers of the stack that need to be resolved, and its base layer actually is energy, and you know, and compute, obviously, and then we get up into the data management and everything else. How do you think about all this? And like, how do you think about what you're building with regards to the consistency of things like energy supply and compute? Because you know, this is just an enormous amount of demand that is going to be coming onto the grid, and it's going to affect everything else that we're doing.
Yeah, so I think maybe going back to the blockchain, right? What blockchains are really good at is effectively identity ownership and marketplaces, right? Payments and marketplaces. And so all of this effectively is some form of a marketplace, right? Be that energy marketplace, compute marketplace, as well as, you know, later on data and models, et cetera. And so at the lower level, the kind of right now, structurally, what happens is every single company effectively wants to own their own kind of underlying infrastructure because, among other things, they actually don't trust third-party infrastructure providers. Like if I'm a model developer, a model builder, and let's say I built a new fancy model that's really amazing, if I'm going to give my weights to some other data center that I don't control, there's a non-zero chance that these weights are going to get leaked. And so this has happened. Mistral has given their weights to Hugging Face to host it, and some engineer in Hugging Face just leaked it on 4chan. So there is actually a trust problem between model developers and hardware providers that needs to be solved, right? Then you have a problem of, indeed, kind of energy demand and compute, right? If I'm putting a data center in Norway, where there's very abundance of energy, but again, there's no models deployed there. There's no demand coming from Silicon Valley companies because they're afraid of kind of using this data center. And then on the other side, you have kind of latency question of somebody from Europe needs to go to Texas data center to actually use a model, right? That seems like a very suboptimal state. So this is where, again, blockchain as a coordination layer can effectively provide an ability, and then a number of other cryptographic and hardware primitives can actually allow us to solve for trust and for monetization and other problems.
So it's almost like you need to put a layer between the physical hardware and the use case so that you abstract away those risky dependencies that we think we have about who owns and who doesn't, so it just disappears, right?
Yeah, I mean, same as internet effectively kind of abstracts out, right? You go to URL and you arrive to a website, it abstracts out how exactly you got there. We kind of need the same infrastructure, and we now have, but it involves a lot of economic value to move around and balance around, and so that's where blockchain kind of, plus a lot of components, can really fit this and something that.
How do you think about this at Venice, Teana? Because you're looking at for open source models, and that's an important standard that you want to maintain. But underneath it, there's still where did that data come from? Who owns it? And then underneath that, where did the compute come from? Is that are you agnostic about that, or do you try to?
Well, we're somewhat agnostic about where the compute comes from, as long as it comes from a decentralized source. So we try and distribute where we're accessing compute from to equally address central points of failure, to reduce latency. So we've got inference coming from different places at different times of day, and reducing kind of the distance.
So that allows you deep-in-based compute.
Indeed, yeah. Okay. But equally, we're also kind of looking at what the evolution of AI usage is going to be. So right now, when we think about using AI, I think most of the people in this room are probably thinking, well, I ask ChatGPT things, and maybe I get Claude to help me write a paper. But really, I think the next big wave of AI adoption is going to come from autonomous agents. And I know that sounds a bit crazy, but we already have autonomous agents today that are able to undertake a number of tasks. And some of them are a bit frivolous, sure, like a Twitter bot, for example. But there's a platform right now that is programming AI agents to do swaps for you. And so you basically, in normal language, say, I connect my wallet, and I want to move, I want to take 50 Ethereum and turn it into Bitcoin. And you just ask it to do that, and it does it. And so that agent is being told what to do, and it's sitting in a platform. But you can create agents to do a number of tasks for you, and some of them may be mundane, and some of them may become quite complex. And so those agents aren't necessarily, they don't care where they're getting that information from. But what they do care about is how they get that inference. And so one of the things that Venice is working on, similar to building on top of what Nir and Illia is building, is how do we ensure that those agents have access to that inference. So we have a token that basically allows developers, individuals, but most importantly, autonomous agents. Those tokens are staked, and then that inference is available to them in perpetuity. So you don't have to connect a credit card. You don't have to have an account. And then that inference can be pulled from a number of different places. So we're not necessarily looking at behavioral patterns of people. We're looking at how machines are going to interact with machines. And I think for me, that's one of the exciting things about AI, because all of a sudden now, like, crypto has a real purpose.
Yeah, the programmable money thing suddenly makes sense.
Suddenly makes sense.
Programmable finance, DeFi, all of that stuff gets plugged into machines that are doing this.
And I think what's really interesting, just one quick kind of antidote, like, for us, there's always been a problem with the friction in actually using crypto. You know, it hasn't been easy, and we've all said, oh, we need to make this easier for users. But what if the users were always meant to be machines?
Right.
And we were just supposed to tell the machines how to use these things because they understand how to interpret and span code.
Building bridges and sort of swapping from one chain to another, and that's a human problem, not a machine problem.
Exactly.
Okay, you've mentioned agents, because this now brings us to the topic that I wanted to segue to here, right? And so one of the lines I've been using a little bit when I talk about agents is that, so I have a literary agent, right? I've written a few books, and I have this wonderful literary agent. Her name's Gillian McKenzie, and she's represented me for 20 years. And she represents me, right? She is my fiduciary. She is absolutely mine. And we get on really well, and we work really well together. She gets rewarded when I do well, et cetera, right? So I asked this question: do we, in this utopian or dystopian future, do we want, our AI agents to be Agent Gillian or Agent Smith? You'll all remember Agent Smith from The Matrix, right? And what that, I think, means is that we have to build a structure in which these agents can be provably ours, right? That
Correct.
We've got control of them. And this brings us to this question that we've been discussing in the green room about, like privacy. What do we need to do to get, the people in this room, the Department of Defense, for God's sake, Illia, we were talking about this yesterday, they're even piling, defense data into these black box machines right now, right? We're really doing some silly stuff, humans. You really are. And so how do we actually get people to start adopting these systems so that they're getting Agent Gillian and not Agent Smith? And Kumar, I mean, you said you're out there trying to get enterprises into this space. What do you think? How's the best way to spread the religion of what's going on here?
So AI is like a statistical system without data, right? Major portion over there is data. And we work with enterprises across the globe. One of these enterprises is Siemens and Walmart of the world, right? So Walmart has this problem. They have a lot of customer data. They want to build a customer support model, and they can't use they can't use ChatGPT because they're worried whether the data will go out. ChatGPT will use that to train other models. Now, they could take any open source model, fine-tune that, and launch an AI chatbot on top of that. But the problem with that is that the chatbot is going to guide the consumer on the problems he has. Like, let's say has not got a package delivered, he's not able to get an auto place and stuff like that. The chatbot is going to guide him to do what? And if it guides it wrong and the consumer has a problem, they don't have traceability to figure out what made the AI make that decision, right? So what we're trying to solve here is to bring that transparency. So it's always a data point that's understood by the model, which is giving an inference and output, which is delivered to the consumer, right? So if something goes wrong, what we can do is basically trace back to the data point that caused that inference to happen. And we can let the model developers remove the poisonous data and retrain the model again. The idea behind this is to make the models much more open, not a black box, so that we can avoid an Agent Smith kind of scenario.
And how receptive are these enterprises? You mentioned a couple, Walmart and Costco, that
so,
working on it. Are they getting it? Are they, embracing it?
Yeah, so there are like 100 other fine-tuning companies just in Silicon Valley, right? they could use any one of them. The reason they work with us is because we are the first guys to crack data attribution on inference level, right? So it is important for them that these models are open, are transparent, because every part of an enterprise is auditable, right? Every decision is auditable. If something goes wrong, they can come back and see what really happened over here. But with AI, they can't just go ahead and rely on the system, not question it, right? So for them to make sure these models are open and to make sure that these models need to be like broken down is a key part of how they're going to adopt to AI. And Walmart, Siemens is one of our clients. We work with a couple of other Web3 firms like Trust Wallet and all them. And the biggest value add we provide is that openness and where we break down the models and explain them for that.
Okay. Bill, you've invested in all these different companies. A lot of them are consumer facing. Some of them are much more B2B and much more weight infrastructure. How do you see the commercialization of solutions?
So as a venture person, I do get to look at a lot of stuff and little green shoots and some that grow into big trees. So I can see the companies in real time working on solutions or proposed solutions. One interesting example that is not yet blockchain based, but it's an interesting problem to solve is like kind of rights management of content. I'm sure many of you, and if not you, your kids use Canva. So I was very fortunate to put that company together and form that team and all that. It's a widely used product. There's something like 240 million designs a month that actually get completed on Canva by actual subscribers, another 160 million a month by students. And all that data, they effectively have rights to. So people may not know them as an AI company, but they are the second most used AI app in the world today. It's pulled by users over 1 billion times a month to do their designs. They did something with OpenAI like 3 years ago called Canva GPT. And you could basically, instead of like pulling a template and moving shit around and all that, you can just type in like, give me a menu for an Italian restaurant with 3 appetizers for this, 5 desserts. It's done. So that's drawing off of the 240 million a month or 1 billion a quarter of designs done. And they had a marketplace before where people could load templates. So they've already got sort of like kind of a contractual thing with some. So it's a very interesting case of a company that has access to a pool of data that isn't really proprietary per se, but they have their arms on it, and they worked out a rights management system that works. So I think you're going to see things like that where people have.
But does it work, right? Because you type it in your instructions to Canva and it's going into ChatGPT, or are we fine-tuned it to a model?
Anthropic. By the way, they don't use OpenAI because OpenAI was taking some of that too. So I think Anthropic is a little bit better to work with.
It's okay.
Yeah.
But you raise a good point.
Yeah.
So again, going back to optionality, I think if you can be able to, it could be creators. So a lot of people use AI for digital art creation. Who does that belong to, right? This is a big topic around kind of copyright, et cetera. And so you might be using a template on Canva that somebody else created. And if you can figure out the rights management system of that and ensure that people continue to get compensated for the stuff that they create, and create that optionality, like, do you want this to be shared, yes or no? Then I think that's fine. I think choice is okay. But where we're at today is that a lot of these platforms either don't provide the option for choice, for you to opt out or opt in. And I think that if you knew that your information was being used to train models, for example, maybe you don't mind when you're talking about this particular set of information. But if you're potentially having an echocardiogram analyzed because you're going to go in and see your cardiologist the next day, maybe you don't want that information out there. And I know people think, oh, well, what difference does it make? It's just, my health record, my test results. In a dystopian view, Agent Smith that works for Blue Cross Blue Shield in 3 years' time might be able to extrapolate all of the information that you put in when you're talking about your lifestyle or, your online therapist with your test results from your echocardiogram and determine that your lifestyle probably needs a premium upgrade. And so I don't think that people are necessarily thinking ahead in 3 or 5 years' time.
Do we actually have sorry, Bill.
Agent Smith might be Sam Altman. Wait, I'm going to tell you a story. Okay, So Sam was at
Apologies,
YC, of course, and I was on the board of a company called Scribd that many of you have seen or used for 10 years. And because the founder came out of YC and was friends with Sam, some people may not know that many of the original trainings of the OpenAI models came from New York Times, Wikipedia, and Scribd.
Yeah.
And so
Big lawsuit underway right now. But
yes, so Tripp, who ran Scribd, went off to start a new company thinking, I'm going to fix this problem, and I'm going to have a rights management system that I'll aggregate because he had all this data from all these different sources from Scribd, port it over and feed it to Sam's company, and basically he had to pivot because he had a meeting with Sam, and I think, I don't have Sam's words, but I think Tripp walked away from there saying, unless he gets sued and loses, I will never have a business.
right,
So
there was a big lawsuit, right?
Yeah,
when I know the lawyer running it, so it'd be
so
interesting what it was.
the other agent-
Maybe zooming out, right? I think the strategy always is building a winning product, right? If we want blockchain and we want kind of AI to be private, the answer is a winning product. And the winning product, the reason why you actually can get the winning product here, because you can connect all of this data, right? Right now, OpenAI actually is, also will be very uncomfortable if you start uploading medical data, because there is actually regulations in the US around HIPAA compliance. Financial data, right? Imagine, your portfolio, your jobs portfolio, that you working at, gets uploaded into OpenAI. Now they're kind of responsible for that. On the other side, they can get hacked, they can get subpoenaed for all this information. So the reality is a privacy product can and should be better product because you can actually give it as much context that as you have as a person, it can be even listening to you day to day, right? Right now, all of the note-taking apps uploading all of your data somewhere, right? At least multiple other companies getting every single transcript that you're taking. Like if you have a fully private product, you can actually trust that this is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so a couple of weeks ago, maybe about 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, the FT came out with an article basically saying, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. You don't need a pension planner, this is in the UK, anymore. Go ahead and just upload all of your pension information into ChatGPT and it will do that for you. And I was alarmed. And the FT is very anti-crypto. And so all of a sudden they're super pro-AI and they're telling people to put all their financial information in there. So I think there's this disconnect about how do we get those people to do that in a private platform.
Yeah, I think the problem is people don't understand what is the kind of guarantees with OpenAI.
But here's the other thing, Teana, you were talking, and both of you sort of talked about these use cases that we all understand, right? Finance and health. But the reality is, right, and you mentioned it, this Agent Smith might be tracking all of your statements about something benign, but it's an AI. It's going to take all of that data and infer something pretty powerful about what you're actually, did you have cancer or whatever it is, right? And so the point I want to
It's not just the data though, Michael. I just very quickly. So right now we have our payments data. We have our location data on our phone, right? And then we have kind of what we want the world to think about us on social media. So there's already 3 very big buckets of our personal information. What people don't necessarily always digest is when you're talking to AI, you're talking to it like things you would write in your diary. So would you be comfortable having your diary posted online? Would you be comfortable having Sam Altman have your private, most innermost thoughts? So people are very intimate with the conversations that they have, thinking that they're just having this conversation with a machine, right? So now we have 4 data points, and one of them isn't what you want people to think about you, it's what you actually believe. And what you actually believe may be somewhat even co-opted by models that have a board of directors that say that this is the version of the truth, right? Which is why I feel so passionate about open source. So it's not just that all this information is there, but the ability to triangulate it. I am telling you, in 2 years' time, these machines are going to know us better than we know ourselves.
Just to add something to that, right? I think it's all about convenience versus privacy, right? The previous generation always chose convenience. That's why all of our data is on the internet. And that's what trained all of these models as well. So I don't think we can stop from models taking data from internet. It will come down to what we can do about how we can at least monetize this, right? Okay, I have some personal knowledge, I have some skill. If I could contribute that to AI and get paid for it, then go ahead and do that. But in terms of how AI models will evolve from there, it comes from the users that use them. The current generation prefers privacy over convenience. That's why they would opt for a privacy-based models. We've seen why they chose open source models over like ChatGPT and all that. And even enterprises do that, right? So I think it's more of our usage patterns that has to change
and
than
that's a
worrying
very
about the
confident
enterprises.
view that we're going to get there, but because
Also,
our behavior has been...
maybe just not to throw the wrench into, but right now there's 0 open source models. We only have open weights models.
Open weights model, yeah.
And we have no idea what went into the source.
Yeah.
And most of the open weights model we use are built in China.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
but
we actually also need to build an open source model.
That's the only option that we have as of now. We don't have we don't want to go with the closed models. At least there is like open weights models.
But like, how do we... Is there truly choice in all this, is what I'm trying to get at here? Like, can people literally be able to say, I want to give this information or that information, this can go to a black box, this bit can't, and will that be fine? Because there's, again, this powerful inference going on of all of my data. And like, I mean, what I'm trying to get at here is, Illia, we talked about this, is there actually a need for some sort of regulation that would regulate and to say that they have to be open source, open weight models, and there has to be this, confidential computing, zero knowledge proof type structure to it, et cetera, et cetera. Are we actually talking about the possibility of policy being?
Yeah, I mean, so like, this is a question I posed because on one side, obviously being in crypto and being in tech, you're generally trying to avoid regulation because you want to move fast. You don't want to have kind of a overhead. On the other side, regulation is there when consumers are effectively making the choice that's suboptimal or bad for them.
Or government departments.
Or well, yeah, especially when we're talking about governments. And so, like, we do have some of this, like HIPAA is indeed already a type of regulation for data privacy, specifically for medical data. And so there is already a precedent for that, and this can be applied at a wider range. But I think it is important that regulation doesn't prescribe the approach, but describes the principle. And I think that's, I mean, at least, previous administration, in case of AI, was very much not doing that, right? They were like, oh, you cannot train a model more than 10 to 27 floating point parameters, right? It's like, that's not the level of abstraction you should be operating at all. So I think it's really important that if we are talking about regulation, it is about the principle of privacy and indeed the principle of
Is it also maybe a property right? The right to your data, like defining that right? Yeah, sovereignty as a right. Teana, your business partner is a rather famous libertarian. Yep. Where do you come down on the policy perspectives here?
So I won't speak for Eric because our views are slightly different on this. I think having spent the last 10 years in the policy space around crypto, I think one of the key takeaways for me has been we need to look at the outcomes that we're trying to achieve and then work backward from that. And I think typically regulation starts with this kind of top-down approach as opposed to a bottom-up. And if you're looking at how many weights and how big a model can be, and that completely defeats the point, right? So if we're looking at it from a point of sovereignty, like the user's data is theirs, and it should be portable, and you should be able to opt in or out. And if we started from that and then worked backward and then found solutions for, I mean, it would also incentivize more platforms to build for that, and it would be helpful from an architecture perspective because we do have tools and they're not perfect yet, right? There isn't a state of the art. Like TEE does allow you to have privacy, not guaranteed, but a security that no one's tampering with that machine. But really, like full homomorphic encryption would be the ideal. It is way too
very expensive
slow.
and hard to do.
Yeah, it's not. You can't use it for general.
That's a whole other conversation that we could go dive deeply into.
But it would incentivize that type of innovation.
Yeah, maybe. Well, yeah, exactly. Unlocking the innovation sometimes can happen for
instead of
policy
thwarting it and squishing it.
I like to think about it as a rights issue, a bill of rights. Anyway, listen, we are already over time, so we have to leave it at that. Round of applause for this panel, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.